All right, Mickey, here we are. What is it? What day is it? Is it January 22nd?
January 22nd.
How are
Sometimes,
how are you feeling?
we're um, yeah, it's been rough. I don't know. I'm not to sugarcoat. I almost my response is always like, "Oh, everything's fine. Everything's fine." I'm a stoic. Everything's fine. I will say, yeah, it's been a bit of a struggle. I think whether or not you agree or disagree with the political situation, there's been a drastic shift, right, in just a few days. Um, that's the
Yeah,
brief. The brief.
I could speak for both of us, just like so, dear audience members, and some of you might want to turn us off after this, and if you do, that's fine. Mickey and I are. I'll speak for you because I think I
Yeah,
know. We're
yeah,
both quite disgusted with
yeah.
the current leadership in America. But not just, I would say, not just that for me. It's not like I am disgusted with the leadership. I am disgusted with the way that the media whitewashes
Mhm.
so much of his very bad behavior. I am disgusted with the way that half of the American public has accepted and whitewashed and does gymnastics around um, just finding explanations for his shitty behavior.
Absolutely.
And so now, like, what I see is currently we're in a situation where our leader is legitimately above the law. Like, there are
Mhm.
no reins on him, including the Supreme Court. He can do anything he wants, and none of it is illegal. He's surrounding himself with a bunch of yes men who are very loyal, and so nobody is there to like check him on his behavior.
Mhm.
And what happens there is that, well, first of all, half of our country is like really excited about that and thinks it's a
Yeah.
good direction, which I'm baffled by. Um, and the other half of us who are paying attention are like, what the fuck? This is,
Absolutely.
and so where what Mickey and I wanted to do with this podcast today was to be really frank and honest about like how we're feeling, how we're coping, what we've done that we've realized is not good or healthy for us, and how we plan on moving forward, right? Like
Right.
how can we be as healthy as we can be and as productive as we can be and as happy as we can be like in this current environment. And the that's may look different from like how we were able to do it before.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
Yeah. So our goal is to not delve too much down into our own political opinions, although we could, as we talked about, we could. Um,
decided that what this podcast is not going to be is an hour long of Mickey and I bitching about and I'd say they're minute, they're not even
yeah.
minute, but like, the decisions and that kind of thing. We're not going to dive into that in detail. We're going to dive into like our response and how we manage ourselves through this period. Um, and yeah, like that's the piece. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, so you start, Mickey. Like, what have you like? How have you managed? Like, what are the good, the bad, and the ugly? What have you been doing for
Yeah.
yourself?
Well, um, I think I will start with some of the things that have not been that won't work long term. And I think I briefly touched on this before we started recording, which is after the election, obviously a lot of disappointed. I was among one of those people that was maybe not as optimistic. I don't know why. I'm kind of a history dork as well, and I'm from the Midwest. So a lot of my family is fairly conservative. My hometown, very conservative. I don't know why, but I just wasn't optimistic. And so I wasn't necessarily shocked at the results. And then I sort of realized like what this was going to mean for the country. And I have worries, not just in the term, like the traditional Republican Democrat, but the actions that he has taken in the past and has promised to take, moving forward that are very, very authoritarian, fascist, when you know enough about Nazi history, Nazi Germany history, there's a lot that is very similar. And I'm not going to predict the future that it's going to go that way, but it's strikingly similar in a lot of ways. So I know other people way smarter than I am are talking about this. So obviously worried, anxious. And what I did for many months was kind of bury my head. I did the avoidance technique, right? Like enjoy what we have for a while, try to ignore it, don't read a lot of news. I mean, all the main news sites are way down in their viewerships, at least not main, CNN, MSNBC, the main that have been purported to be on the liberal left leaning. Um, so there's that. So that's how I initially kind of responded. Maybe wasn't the best thing to do to prepare for then Monday, even though I knew it was coming. Monday, I kind of just checked out. Again, I wasn't on social media. I didn't watch the news. I certainly didn't watch the inauguration. Um, and I got,
And again, I have to preface like everything with being like, I don't know if this is true, but and that can be having a lot of conversation.
yeah,
But it was only 26 million people did, which 26 million seems like a lot, but
yeah,
I think like in the historical reference of that, it is an indicator that we were not alone in tuning out that day.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
the vast majority of the public did.
Yeah. And I, as we have talked, like that is a legit coping mechanism at some point, like when things get so overwhelming or if you choose to do this but I think being mindful of when you're choosing to do it is important, and knowing why you're doing it. But that avoidance, I think the ignoring, the avoidance, the being aloof, it doesn't affect me, it's not going to impact me, like that's no longer true. And I also do somewhat believe that we're sort of in this situation because too many people were not paying attention. I mean, it's sort of like a third of the country voted for Kamala Harris, a little bit more than a third of the country voted for Trump, right? And then a third basically didn't vote, I think. I might be wrong on those stats, but it's something like that, right? Like, so there's a lot of people in the country that just, are checked out. And yeah, I don't think that we can do that as a number one mechanism anymore. I don't think it's right. I don't think most of us would have a value system that would allow us to really do that for too long without questioning, like, okay, so, what does this mean for my kids, my grandkids, my community, if you don't have kids like myself? Because I even though I'm single person, right? Like I don't have children, I still care about.
Oh, Mickey.
Right. Oh yeah. I'm a, what was it? I'm a, well, and they legitimately probably think that. So, I digress. But, I think that was, what I wanted to touch on, initially, because I'm human and, I get overwhelmed. Like everyone right now is overwhelmed, but I think we can't, by being checked out, I don't mean like I was ignoring. I mean, I still went to the news sites, but I was more checked out than I had been in the past, kind of as a self-preservation, just try to ignore it a little bit and enjoy the time with my dogs in the winter and, whatever. So, yeah, I'll stop there. Like I'll just I'll go with my one, like that I recognize as is self-protection and a way to calm my nervous system, right? But I don't think it's something that I want to default to for, the rest of the 4+ year, however long, right? I'm not going to put a timeline on this. I know a lot of people are saying it's just 4 years, right? Oh, well, I don't know. We can talk about that too. But yeah, what about you? Do you want to share how you've been coping and handling?
Yeah, I've been on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I've just done the whole thing where like there's times where I've really immersed myself in the news, deciding that like I need to know it all so that I can have an educated opinion and then I can know what's going on. I primarily watch news that comes from the left, and every once in a while I check in with like what are they saying on the right. But it's interesting because like every time I check in with like what are they saying on the right, I'm like, what? Like they're like what? Like it literally throws me for a loop in a way that I think is like not good for me. And so and so then I go into my cycle of like I'm not paying any attention, right? Like I'm just gonna go, walk my dog in the woods, and I'm gonna, numb myself from this whole thing. Like I just am gonna shut it all off. And so even as I'm doing this podcast and as I'm like pretending to give advice here, a lot of this is really for me. Like this is me
Hmm.
in real time trying to figure out how I'm
Yeah.
going to manage my own sanity, how I'm going to stay healthy, how I'm going to stay happy. Um, in this environment, right? And it's hard because when I check the news, I feel worse.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so then I'm remembering, well, so one of the things I've done, like talk about like, what have we done over the last couple of months? First of all, my husband did a lot of what you did. And like I swear, Mikki, every day he was like, something's going to happen. He's not actually going to be our president. And I was like, you need to
Yeah.
come back down to earth, honey, because like he is going to be our president. Even like 2 days before, like even on like last Saturday, he was like, nope, somebody's going to step in and do something. There's no way this is actually happening. I'm like, this is actually happening. Like you need to start accepting reality for what it is. So I wasn't in the denial phase like he was. I was really trying to bring him into reality, I think. But yeah, for me, it's been so one thing that I did, which generally has been helpful for me, is like and I think I told you about this last week or another time where I started listening to these podcasts that are history. It's a
Hmm.
podcast called Slow Burn, and it's all about history. And like season one is the history of President Nixon, right, and Watergate and all of that. And all that was happening in 1974. So look, that was before you were born. I was being born. It was the year I was born. So I'm going to completely forgive myself for not knowing really anything about that. And the podcast was really interesting because it it went into like all the details on both sides. I mean, obviously, hindsight is 2020, so we can look back and be like, that guy was corrupt, that guy was lying, that and now that we know what we know, it's it's factually correct that Nixon was lying the whole time. But they had a lot of interviews with people who were around and alive at that time and are still alive now and like talking about what they remember about it. And one thing that I thought was interesting was that they were saying, Nixon was up for reelection, and at some point, uh, it the facts were coming out, right? That this guy's involved in this scandal, this guy is criminal, this guy's lying to us, and literally half the public didn't care, right? So, like, if you were a Nixon supporter and you were faced with the facts that he's a criminal and he's lying to you, like the mental gymnastics that they were doing in 1974 were exactly the same mental gymnastics that people do today to defend whatever idea or person or leader or whatever that we like or we want to defend. Like our brains just do this thing. Season two was about President Clinton, right? And here's the thing, Mikki, I was alive, of course, during that time. I was in college. I paid zero attention to politics, like absolutely zero. I was in college. Yeah, I was drunk a lot. I didn't have a TV. I didn't turn on the radio. There was no social media, right? I like literally had no idea. And so when I go back and I listen to that podcast and like that guy was a complete sleazebag. So whether or not you agree with
Hmm.
his policies or the way, some of his social initiatives or like whatever it is that policy wise he was doing leading the country, like he was a legit sleazebag and he was a womanizer and he was a liar and he was a character, he was a bad character.
Hmm.
And all of that was coming out during his reelection period. And the American public was more mad at the media for exposing what he had done than they were mad at him for doing what he was doing. Like as a whole, like
Yeah.
granted, there may be like some people who thought differently, but the big picture sense was like the facts were out there, the American public knew, and they reelected him anyway.
Yeah.
And so you're like, oh, okay, so this is happening on both sides, right? Like regardless, like it's Republican, Democrat, whatever. But the American public has been showing for 50 years that we will ignore facts and elect genuinely bad people to office because we've been doing it, right? And that's what our history shows. And so, and it's weird to say that makes me feel better, but it does because like here we are, like we've lived through all of that, right?
Hmm.
But the other thing that where I'm personally battling is like, so like all that shit went down and I didn't know any of it. So I was literally like not affected by
Hmm.
it. And
Hmm.
and that's where my personal battle is right now is trying to decide like how involved do I want to
Hmm.
be? How much do I want to know? Right. Cause
Hmm.
like the more I know, the more I'm pissed off.
Hmm.
And all this has happened before. I didn't know about it. And I mean, it sounds like such a cop out because obviously other people knew about it and took care of it. So like,
Well,
it's my turn to step up and be like part of the solution instead of burying my head in the sand. But then it's like balancing that with like being a happy person,
mhm,
and it's like, I think we're not alone even in sharing this dilemma. Like from
right.
what I know about like my local friends here who believe similar and have similar values to me, like everybody it seems like is leaning toward tuning out. And
Yeah,
it is a
which is,
self-preservation strategy. And there is merit to that for sure,
yeah,
right? Where we're like, I'm happier when I'm tuning out.
yeah,
And then I do worry about like, well, then what happens? And then I think, well, do I have any control over it anyway? So then, like, my solution to where I'm going with all of this is like, okay, what am I going to do for myself to
mhm,
help myself through this? And as I share these, maybe these are things that like other people can do too.
yeah, yeah. I think, and before we kind of dive into, I think kind of know where we're going to go with this, but I think just briefly, I think that it'll be really important to pick and choose battles.
Yeah.
Um, what do you, I think checking out complacency in this time period, with some of the real concerns that are being shared that are happening already. I mean, you probably, I don't remember, yesterday morning waking up, you were Meta forced you to follow uh, POTUS, FLOTUS, and the JP, right? Or I'm sorry, VP, JD Vance, right? I'm always up very early, and I saw JD Vance and Melania as suggested friends, and I was like, what? And I briefly went, and like hundreds of my friends are friends with them already. And I thought this was very curious because I've basically purged my friends. If there's, I choose not to engage, right? I really like if you're going to post something that is untruthful and anti-science and anti-woman and anti-LGBTQ and anti-gay and anti-black, and I mean, I just delete, I delete and block, and that's that. So my friend list is pretty much an echo chamber, right? Which I know has problems. However, social media for me is not where I'm going to get most of my information, and it's mostly a place for me to go and generally have like pleasant experiences, seeing people's dogs, seeing people ride their bike and beautiful places, right? Like I'm not looking right, right. That's what it used to be. Yeah. So I only bring that up because of this whole like technology privacy, situation, so that if people are going to tune out, maybe that's still fine for them, but they should at least be aware of what's happening behind the scenes in terms of privacy, propaganda. If you're going to choose to stay on platforms that are not going to fact check, which to me as a scientist means that they're going to basically let anyone's opinion, any kind of hate speech, I mean, there was an example of women can now be referred to as common household objects. So I think there's things that people should be aware of to at least crack down or be, try to protect themselves a bit. That as well as some of the policies being passed that will directly affect, whether or not you're hired, right? If you happen to not be, to be honest, a probably straight white man, right? They just overturned the Equal Opportunity Act from 1965, I think today. I might be getting that wrong, but it's basically the act that forced federal hiring to not consider gender, sex, and race. So a big one, right? Really a big one. So as well as some other policies, national emergencies, things that, under some of the other presidents, while we didn't know what was going on and they had some other, I'm sorry, I'm moving my seating. There may have been some, there may not have been as extreme of policies being put in place in those other examples that you gave. Like, for example, Nixon actually was quite pro-environment, right? So, and obviously with the 60s and a lot of the affirmative action, desegregation, it was very, very front and center. People may not have liked it, but, again, we're a country that the founding principles, at least, well, unless you're a woman, I guess, because we still don't have equal opportunities as women with the 28th Amendment, which is not really going to happen. Everyone was so excited about the 28th Amendment. I'm like, it is not going to happen. It's not going to stand. I'm sorry. Prove me wrong. I would love to be wrong on that. But so yeah, I think that in addition to choosing your battles here and like what's really important to you, because it may get very overwhelming. The other thing is to also get involved with your local community. And I don't mean get involved like politically. I mean, you can get involved politically if you'd like, but more to support people that may be in need, that are really going to be impacted. Immigrant. I mean, I live in an area we have a lot of immigrants, undocumented and documented. I probably know several that have come and helped me with my property, working on my trees, and so I think that's something, because a lot of people will be affected with the immigration situation. The LGBTQ community, I've already sought out, like, I was like, I really, my self-care, what I might give myself is a massage. And I actually sought out, like, what massage therapists, do we have anything in where I'm located that is in support, even if they are not a member, like, they support the community, right? Because I think it's going to be important, to support those people. So I just digressed a little bit because I think we're going to dive into like more action. I guess those are action. They're kind of action steps. They're more of like broad stroke, guidance, I guess, on how to delve out your energy. So it's like, get more local, but then also, stay enough informed to know what's going on, and then, pick and choose your battles if you have limited energy, like most of us will probably have. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think if I go back to being aware of my own habits and actions, like the things that I was doing that was making me feel better or worse,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like one thing I've started to do is to become very mindful and aware of like when I spend time like on that media site or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
how do I feel after? And there was a time where I think like I definitely was spending too much time like on threads.
Mm-hmm.
Threads specifically it started out like I felt like it was pretty good for a while.
Yeah.
And then um and then it got to the point where it was like, I mean, I don't know how this is gonna sound. I don't care how it sounds. My threads, like I basically train the algorithm that like I don't want any bullshit in my feed because I just would block like anybody who was saying stuff I didn't want to hear. I just blocked them. So the algorithm's like, oh, I figured out what you want to hear, right? And but then it turned out that like my whole feed around the time of like January 6th, my whole feed turned into a bunch of well, Democrats who were sad, anxious,
Mm-hmm.
scared, depressed, like all the things. And I'm like, I'm feeling all of
Yeah.
that too. So I'm literally like in agreement, like, yes, 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 yes. I feel like all of these things with you. And then what I realized is that after 15 minutes on that site, I felt worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I totally agreed with everything they were saying and they were reinforcing
Mm-hmm.
how bad I felt. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't think I need any help feeling worse,
Yeah.
right? Like I
Yeah.
already felt bad.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't need your help feeling worse. And so I just decided that I didn't want to be on Threads anymore. Interesting fun fact. You cannot delete your Threads account unless you delete your Instagram account.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So you
I,
can turn it off. Like
okay.
you can, there's like a slider button that sort of shows other people that you're not checking Threads. So what I
Oh.
did was I deleted the app from my phone,
Mm-hmm.
right? So now there's no longer a little button that I can push to like access Threads. And I toggled off
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram to say that I'm on Threads. And since the day I made that decision that Threads is not helping me, I'm like really proud of myself that like I've not checked Threads. And like Instagram still tries to get me to
Yeah.
do it, right? Like the algorithm's like, hey, your friend just posted this thing on Threads and you might think it's interesting. And then I'm like, no, screw you. I'm not checking Threads, right? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't make me feel better. So I think that like having the awareness of that is super important.
Mm-hmm.
I also went in and deleted my Facebook account, which
Mm.
like it hasn't even been a week. Like Mickey, it's been like 4 days since I deleted it. Oh my gosh, what a relief! Like it's so like I mean, it was like nostalgic for me because I remember a decade ago,
Hmm.
or like when Facebook first started, how fun and enjoyable it was, and like
Hmm.
it felt like a legitimate way to connect with my friends and to see what everybody was
Yeah.
doing and how they were feeling. I felt more connected to people because of what I was seeing on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then after Zuckerberg's announcement of like we're not fact checking anymore, like I just did some imagination
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, what is this? Like it's already so full of misinformation.
Hmm.
And so he's decided that like, you know what, I'll just like let people fight it out in the comments. Like we'll
Yeah.
just do community notes instead of
Yeah.
deleting. So like somebody can go on and post whatever bullshit they want. And instead of like Meta being the police of that, we just expect you as a
Yeah.
community to go in and you guys argue it out and fight it out and decide on your own what the truth is. And I'm like, I'm like, there's no part of that that I want
Yeah.
to be,
No.
And so I was like, but still, I felt like I had some business stuff there, like some
Yeah.
of my athletes that are there. And so I felt like I have some ties and I went back and forth. And I tell you what, making a decision and then following through on that decision, whatever it is, like pick your thing.
Hmm.
It's so empowering and it feels
Yeah.
so good. So like when I made the decision, I only announced it really to my internal team. Like I
Hmm.
didn't go on Facebook and make some public
Yeah.
thing and say like I'm leaving, blah blah blah. I don't need to do that. But I did it for my private team because I thought they
Yeah.
need to know like why I'm not going to be posting here anymore. And then and by the way, do you have Facebook or have you
So
deleted it or
I deleted Facebook probably November time period. I not way before he made the announcement, but I had already you never saw anything but ads and
even like delete your account or
yeah.
did you just
No, I
is
deleted
like
the account. Yeah.
there you wait like 30 days. I
Yeah.
mean, like the way that they make it so hard, and like
Yeah.
it's one part of me is thinking like the fact that it was so hard to delete my account, like I couldn't find the delete account button
Hmm.
in my settings. I had to
Hmm.
go look. Apparently, there's some like other. I don't know where it was. Like, I mean, I looked everywhere. I ended up asking AI, like
Hmm.
ChatGPT, like help me delete my Facebook. I can't find it in my settings, and it's like here it is, and I'm like, nope, I'm not finding it there. It eventually sent me a link and said, click on
Huh.
this link, and from here you'll be able to delete your account. And so I clicked on the link, and I'm like, I don't know where I would have found that link otherwise. Like
So
ChatGPT gave it to me, and even then, it's like, well, we'll hold off for 30 days in
huh.
case you change your mind. And if I log in again to Facebook,
Oh wow.
it will stop the
I think
deletion process.
I think that actually changed since I deleted it. And I'm wondering if it's because he made the announcement. So he's anticipating people are going to leave. Yeah, I left in November just because I felt like I rarely checked it. It was mostly crap that I didn't care about. So I just deleted. And I remember it was a little bit buried. And I did when I deleted it, just said, we'll keep this if you want to, reopen it or something. There was like a, save this email. So it's I think it's a different. It sounds anyways. It was definitely not as challenging as what you described, but I'm guessing, I mean, they're making changes all the time to these apps. So yeah.
Literally like I log in and so basically it said so I went in Sunday, so it was January 19th was the day that I was like, okay, I wanted to delete the account. And then it said that if I log into Facebook anytime between now and February 18th, it will
Hmm.
stop my like
Wow.
deletion process. And it said on February 18th, if I'm still inactive as of that time, then my account will be deleted. And I was kind of like, well, that's my birthday. So like, what a convenient day,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
birthday will actually finally be deleted. But even that act of like making it that hard and then like trying to make us follow like the accounts they
Well,
want, I'm just thinking social media is going to go down
yeah.
the shitter in the next couple of years, which is sad because like the potential utility there is really
Hmm.
good. So I will say I'm keeping my Instagram account. I debated back and forth about that. And it's a lot like that's where I get my triathlon news.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like I follow all the professional triathletes on Instagram and I like seeing like their announcements. I like seeing what they post. I like seeing their race reports there. I like
Well,
there's stuff that I still find valuable. And
mhm,
so I'm just liberally using my block button. Again, I blocked
mhm.
POTUS and all that crap. And I'm like, I want my triathlon news here.
Yeah. And
So
it's possible we'll see how it all, I mean, this is evolving, right? So I think, we had talked a bit about maybe keeping it and, I, I'm, I'm, I'm on the fence, my anticipation, I don't know if this will happen or not. I have no idea what's going to happen, honestly, with social media. I've never been good at it. So, but I wonder if people will start to move over to a different platform, like all, the pros, like if, for example, I started an account on Blue Sky, and right now it feels like the old Twitter back in like what 2005 or something. I mean, I'm following mostly Mars science, and there's not a lot of triathlon. There's some, but it's small. I mean, it's a small platform yet. So I don't know. We'll see, what happens, but I'm still like, I still have my Instagram account as well. And I'm going to go through friends and I am also like, people are starting to post, well, they've been doing this for a while, but like when, let's just say people, get into their DMs and they are sharing, very aggressive, I won't call it hate speech, but like they're being awful people. They're just being awful people. And some of the people I follow have shared, these folks getting into their DMs and just being, just awful people. And so I will go and say, oh, I follow that person. I'm not following them anymore. So very locking it down, to I don't know. Yeah, maybe making my echo chamber smaller and smaller, but I'm okay with that at this point. So, I know you had a Substack around social media. Is social media the new smoking, which is great, really good read. If anyone's interested, go to Michelle's Substack. I think what you decide to do with social media, it should be mindfully done, right? Whether you delete, whether you block people, whether and what I was going to suggest. So this is what I did on Monday. I was off social media. I was off the news. I didn't watch anything. And then when I logged in that evening, like, I don't know, 7:30, 8 o'clock, right? And mine was, it's echo chamber. So I'm seeing all these people that are political pundits and journalists, or even comedians, right? Like a lot of the comedians I follow went to DC, to interview people, and people are sharing, what's happening, and I mean, yeah, like I could immediately tell that my nervous system went through the roof, right? Like my blood pressure probably went up, my heart rate went up, just wow, right? So I was like, that's not good. I delayed going to bed by like an hour and a half, just on the socials. Oh my God, just like deeper and deeper and deeper, right, into the despair hole. So Tuesday, I so I've been meditating for probably over 10 years now, and I've done all the apps. If anyone wants recommendations on apps, they're all different, but I have a very strong morning routine, which involves meditation, some journaling. So I did that on Tuesday, and like, okay, I'll check social media briefly. And I kid you not, like people had then covered all of these, the presidential, where I'm blanking on the executive orders. Thank you. And oh my,
know what you're
I
talking
mean,
about.
let's honestly, I only was on for less than 10 minutes. And again, I'm like, I have to do another meditation now. Like I have to do another, and I found a meditation. I'm right now using the Waking Up app, which I really like. And I found a full body scan, and I had to do that. And it allowed me to then start to move through my day with more mindfulness, and because what happens, right, is it's not just that you ruminate on all these things that you're seeing and you're agreeing with or disagreeing with or whatever the case might be. Even if you're not thinking of those things, your nervous system is elevated. And so it brings this anxiety and tension and shortness. I mean, I being short with my dogs, or, whatever it might be. And it's just not helpful, right, to continue to be in that state. So I think setting real, like whatever you need, because you're different than Michelle and I, but like whatever your threshold would be, maybe it's 10 minutes and then you have to have something else planned, either a meditation, or maybe it's a walk with your dog, or pet your cats, or play with your kids, or whatever, to then bring your nervous system back down, deregulate, basically, de-escalate. So I know, Michelle, you've got probably some better tips on that, because I know your flow running course also covers a lot of breathing. And so I know you also have a meditation practice. So yeah, I don't know. Do you want to dive into what you want to, yeah, how you can help folks, right?
So this is the part that, like, if you've suffered through that last 30 or 40
Yeah,
minutes listening to us ramble on, and we promised we were going to be helpful, this is the part where we start to get
yeah.
helpful. Um, so, and I kind of want to go back even before we start in on this. And it's mostly because I'm talking to you, and I know that you have been coached by Lucho, and it
Mm-hmm.
was probably like a decade ago, maybe
Mm-hmm.
even longer, that Lucho was really the first coach or person who introduced this idea of nervous system health as like a big picture concept.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember him talking about, because remember he went through a period where he was trying to like convert himself into a sprinter,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
whatever years
Yeah.
those were. And, and and that was an interesting challenge for him as an endurance athlete, because it was like a whole new world
Mm-hmm.
of like physiology that he had to learn. And that's where he really encountered like, oh, you know what? Nervous system health is really important if you're going to perform, especially in like a sprint race, but also even in long distance races, like as it turns out, like having a healthy nervous system is really important for us as athletes. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, here as we transition into like this is in theory a podcast about endurance
Right.
athletes, even though we've been talking about like world politics for the last
Yeah.
40 minutes. The idea being that if we are endurance athletes and we want to perform, like, we want to train in a way that allows our bodies to adapt so that we are able to
Mm-hmm.
perform. So, and in order to do that, we need to be healthy. And what happens is, especially in times like these where we are like in this onslaught or like this avalanche of bullshit information, like some of it's real, some of it's not, we don't know what to believe, like the stuff that maybe is true, we're like, oh my, I don't want to believe that, so we don't, like, we just spin everything, like we're the environment that we're in is absolutely set up to keep our nervous systems in a state of fight or flight all the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we're living in this state of fight or flight, nervous system activation. And if you're wondering right now, what does that mean? Am I stuck in that? I have a whole list of potential symptoms that you might be experiencing. So if you're experiencing these symptoms that I'm about to set out, your system is living in fight or flight, which has a lot of downstream repercussions. So that would mean you experience a lot of muscle tension. You could be clenching your jaw. This is a lot in like your shoulders, and your neck feels really tight. I remember my husband used to come up to me sometimes and like try to massage my shoulders, and he's like, "These are like rocks," and I'm like, and I was just like, "Yep, that's just how I am." You know what I mean? Like I didn't know any better. So like excessive muscle tension, tight jaw, if your heart rate runs on the higher side all the time, like that is an internal state system that is on high alert. It's an indication that your whole system is on high alert. If you take a breath and your shoulders go up, like if breathing to you looks like this, and your shoulders go up and you're breathing like in your chest, that is an indication that you're stuck in fight or flight. If you sweat a lot, like Vicky, I was just like a heavy sweater. I'm like, I'm sweating from the bottom of my feet. Like, you know, the palms of my hands are sweating, the bottom of my feet are sweating. I did not know that that was a sign that like my whole system is stuck in fight or flight. Digestive issues.
I
People
knew
are like,
that
oh,
one.
I just like, yeah, like that food just doesn't agree with me. I'm like, well, it doesn't agree with you sometimes, but other times, like when you're on vacation, it's fine.
Mm.
Is that the case? Like, so if you find that you can't figure out what foods are the ones that are irritating you, it's likely
Mm.
not the food.
Yeah.
It's your system that's not in the rest or digest state. So like it, it's going to reject food. So that would be like, you know, you've got your bloating or
Mm.
diarrhea, constipation, that kind of thing. Cold hands and feet. is another system of or symptom of that, and likely that stems also from the shallow chest breathing, right? So
Yeah.
like our circulation is going to be impaired when we're not breathing properly, and blood flow to the extremities is going to be a repercussion of that. So if you have constantly cold hands or feet, um, pay attention. That feeling, and we all know people. I felt like this too, and we know people who do are wired but tired,
Yeah.
right? Where like you don't have
Hmm.
a lot of energy, but you can't go to sleep, and that leads to the next one, which is insomnia. So
Mm.
like if you're not sleeping well and you can't fall asleep or you can't stay asleep, if we go back to like evolutionary terms, if you think about like what is sleep, like in order to it's a very vulnerable state. We have to surrender into sleep. We have to let sleep happen. So if we're not feeling safe and our bodies, our systems internally are on edge all the time, they won't let us sleep.
Yeah.
And then frequent illness. So
Yeah.
you have
I knew that one. Yeah. And
yep, you have
I've had athletes that have very high stress. You know, we don't always talk about stresses, but it's hectic, and they have been sick all the time, and it's like, yeah, it's yeah,
it is. Like we all have immune systems
yeah,
that are trying to fight. So like a virus, and I've seen this like in my own house. Like when a virus comes into the house, whoever has the weakest immune system is the one who gets it the worst,
yeah,
right? And like, whoever's immune system is functioning the strongest is the one who's like, well, I felt a little tickle in my throat, but then like my
yeah,
body kicked it and it went away. And so, yeah, if you're sick all the time, if you feel like you experience anxiety, if a little thing happens and you fly off the handle and
hmm,
like just lose your mind, that is a sign of a dysregulated nervous system. I've totally done that. Difficulty letting go, like that's
mm,
one where I'm like, I feel like I've got a lot of these nailed, and that one sometimes like
that's hard.
the thoughts on the loop that are like,
Hmm.
yeah, like uh, that one's what I'm still working on.
Yeah,
So if we look at behaviors, like if you're like I have difficulty sitting still. I don't like to be quiet. If like I can't meditate because I can't just sit still and be
yeah,
quiet for 10
totally.
minutes, like that's a red flag. Like
That's
we should be able to do that.
yeah. Well, and you know, the old Buddhist Zen saying is like, if you say you can't sit in stillness for 5 minutes, you need to sit in stillness for 15, right? Like it is, or more, right? Yeah,
Like to do that.
yeah,
You and then this is funny because like it's exactly what we talked about before, avoiding stressful situations.
mm,
Like so while that can be like it's a coping mechanism, but it's also a sign that we are overwhelmed,
yeah,
right? So I'm going to avoid that situation because I literally don't have the capacity to
yeah,
handle it because I'm already on edge so much. You have difficulty focusing, racing thoughts, forgetfulness, um, those types of behaviors are all indicators that your system is stuck in fight or flight. And so, by the way, it doesn't have to just be politics of like
yeah.
why we're
Oh
stuck in
no,
fight or flight.
yeah,
Like, there's so many life situations that can put us there. I think the reason why this is timely for us now is because like even people who had perfect childhoods and and grew up and were fine, like are can be experiencing all of this, and it might be new like at this time because
yeah.
the uh, and is. And so
I
if we go ahead.
I was just going to say, I heard someone refer to this that because I think it's been noted, right? And I think people in your community have noted it. You know, my athletes have noted it. My family, those that are on more my viewpoints. This kind of collective, what do they call it? Like, well, no, now I'm going to blank on the term. I think they used it was like the second Great Depression, but it's not economic depression. It's like cultural, right? Depression, it's societal depression. And so it is. I mean, recognizing that and calling it what it is. I mean, it's reality. And this is not politics as usual. Even if there have been really poor decisions and things that were not, done in a way that we would have liked to have believed they were, right? Talking about Nixon and Clinton. And, we have lots of, there's lots of skeletons in the closet, so to speak, for in the United States and politically.
To our kids,
Right.
nope, we expose
Yeah.
those kids to like what the real history
Yeah.
was.
So
Nope.
Anyways, go ahead. Yeah, it's just what I wanted to say was like the collective that is occurring here. So it is real. Yeah.
Big picture sense, like all of those things stem from, in a very real, deep seated, subconscious way, I don't feel safe and I don't feel like I belong.
Yeah.
Right. So, like, when we feel safe and when we feel like we belong, our whole systems downregulate and relax, are therefore healthier, like the state that we are supposed to live in most of the time.
Yeah.
So, like, that, the fight or flight nervous system state. So, like, while I just listed out like all of those like potentially negative things of like living in that fight or flight state, um, it's not a matter of that state not being useful to us.
Yeah.
Like, it's totally useful to us. Like, in emergency situations, we want a healthy nervous system to be able to react immediately to like get us out of danger, to, it's a survival mechanism, really. And so it's really important that we have access to that fight or flight state. We don't want to get stuck in like a parasympathetic state and not have access to it. The problem stems from when we live there all the time, because we're not like coming down into rest and digest, which means that our bodies are not recovering from the training we're doing.
Yeah.
They're not recovering from that news cycle that you just watched. Your immune system then like isn't going to function as normal. If you're training, you're not going to adapt to the stimulus that you are giving yourself. And so if you're an athlete, this is really important to you, because if you want to, like, if you're trying to train because you're trying to improve your state, then it is critical that you are healthy first.
Yes.
Then you do the training, your body adapts to the training when you're recovering. And like, that's the big picture thing. So it's like recognizing when we're in a state of not being able to recover, guess what? Continuing to doing hard work during that time, you're just digging yourself into the hole.
Yeah.
And deeper and deeper.
Yeah. So if you can't solve, right, if you can't bring yourself back down, the alternative is then you probably need to cut your intensity, which was going to be my, if people are noticing that they are highly triggered, stimulated right now, don't be afraid to cut the intensity from your session and go for a walk, go for a jog. That's much, much easier. Low zone 2, run, walk, go for an easy spin, just because exactly what, you said, it's, you're compounding the real, and you can probably compound for a little bit, right? Maybe a day or two. Yeah. Well, yeah. But it's not great. It's not great. So can you, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, one thing that was really interesting, when I went through a period a couple of years ago where I really dove into HRV, like I wanted to learn and understand, like, what is heart rate variability? What is it? How is it useful to us? Like, how do we measure it? What does it mean? What do we do with that information?
Yeah.
And I have a much better understanding of it now than I did a couple of years ago, when I was first learning about it. Because the reality is this: when your HRV is low, that is an indicator that your system is stuck in like a fight or flight. It's currently like in a state of fight or flight. You're not in a state where your body is ready to adapt to the work that you're doing.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you're incapable of doing the work.
Right.
And that's where, like, I think there's some confusion, because people think like, oh, my HRV is low, so therefore I shouldn't be able to hit that high intensity session. And that is not the case.
That's not the case.
With a low HRV, you can still go out and do it. You might even feel like you nailed it.
Yeah.
Right. But the difference is your body's not in a state where it's going to recover from it, therefore adapt to it, therefore benefit from it.
Yeah.
And so it's not a matter of I can't do it. You can do it, but you'll benefit more if you execute that session at a time when your whole system is ready for it. Then that's how you actually get better and improve from the work that you did.
It's I describe it as like a diminishing returns, right? Like, yes, you can still go out and do that. And some people who just want to go train hard all the time and they don't want to deal with, okay, fine, but you may not get the race results you're looking for because you're actually not as fit, right? Or you could be fitter, right? Sorry. We've got...
For anybody who's watching on YouTube, Mikki is being accosted by one of her dogs right now.
This is Iodune, for anyone that's, sorry. She's about 9 months and she needed a longer walk today. and we didn't get a longer walk, so we're a little bit needy.
Is I need to go out.
Yeah. Um, so it's not that she has to go out and go potty. She can, but she's just bored. She's bored, and Braggy is sleeping. So, anyways, yeah, it's diminishing returns, right? Like you can go do the hard training, but are you adapting? And then a lot of I see it a lot, right? People have very high expectations for what they're going to race at then because they do all this hard training, but it's like, but you're actually not a yeah, no. Maybe some people might be able to pull it off, but it's pretty small percentages. So,
Pull it off for a short period.
true. Yeah.
By short period, that might be a whole year or two.
Yeah.
But at some point, it
Yeah.
comes
It
back
catch
in
up. Yeah.
every single
Yeah.
time it comes in.
Yeah.
So, if we're going to be helpful here, which is our
Yeah.
goal, be
Yeah.
helpful. If you found yourself relating to that whole list of symptoms that I was talking about, that shows that like your system is stuck in this fight or flight state, to bring yourself back down. And here's the thing: people who are stuck in fight or flight hate this advice so much. So guess what? If you hate the advice I'm about to give you, take it as a sign that you are stuck in fight or flight.
I think that's great. Yeah.
Because I've had people tell me, if one more person tells me that I just need to slow down and breathe, I'm going to lose it. Like, well,
Okay. Wow.
sign.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where you're at. I used to roll my eyes and laugh at this stuff too, be like, oh, how can that possibly help? So what we're trying, the main way, the easiest way, the quickest way to like tap into these systems and bring yourself out of fight or flight and into rest and digest is to breathe using your diaphragm.
Mhm.
And so what that means is I'm breathing low and slow. And so I'm going to breathe in and out of my nose. My shoulders are not going to rise. I'm going to feel the contents of my belly are going to come out. So I'm going to not be bracing my core. I'm not bracing, guarding, protecting as I'm doing this. I'm letting myself relax. And as I breathe, my chest may expand like this, but my shoulders are not going up. My rib cage expands out laterally. My belly expands out. I get bigger through my core here. And
Mhm.
then what you want is the exhale to be extended longer than the inhale,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So, like, you can take a shorter inhale. You can hold at the top or the bottom. It doesn't really matter. What matters the most is that you're using your diaphragm and that the exhale is longer than the inhale.
Mhm.
And so, like, there's so much other stuff you can learn about breathing.
Yeah.
And if you're like, I don't want to dig into all the ins and outs and all the bells and whistles that are dealing with breathing, if you know those two things,
Mhm.
breathe with your diaphragm, make your exhale longer than your inhale, you're going to go a long way and
Yeah.
do it through your nose.
Yeah.
It's like, that's really number one. And if you hate that advice, take a serious look because, like, um, that's going to be really helpful for you. Um, Plumbing is another one that, like, it just sort of puts you in that state. So if you can incorporate that anywhere. You're driving in your car and you're listening to a song and you're humming. If you're standing, I've given athletes this advice before when they're standing in line getting ready to do a triathlon race. If you're really, really nervous and you find yourself like already your palms are sweating and you're talking really fast and you're breathing like short and shallow, when you hear like the national anthem or if they're playing a song or there's music in the background, if you hum along to that, you're sending a calming
Hmm.
signal to your whole system, which is like a neat little hack, that you can use. Um, Secondly, Mickey and you had talked about this, like another really good way to bring yourself into a rest and digest state is that body scan that you were
Mhm.
talking about. Anything that gets you out of your head and into your body is going to be something that's going to help you. And so, well, I take that back. It's not really anything that's easy, slow, rhythmic movement. So, like, hard exercise tends to feel good to people who are really stressed, but
Mhm.
it's because you're like getting a stress response from that, and you're so addicted to stress and cortisol and adrenaline that, like, people who are addicted to stress feel like they thrive on hit workouts
Mhm.
because they get a hit of adrenaline, cortisol, and they're living on that.
Yeah.
And so to, you don't want to be flooding it with adrenaline. So you want easy movement. So that's like you're walking an easy spin on the bike, swimming if you're fit enough to do it without it like being hard for you. Dancing, interestingly, is a really good one. And I think that's where flow rope fits into that, because flow rope is essentially like dancing with the rope. Tai Chi, yoga, those types of movements. Like I never understood Tai Chi. I've seen like old people in the park doing Tai Chi, especially here. Like that's a pretty common Asian practice. And I didn't understand it. And like, how do you get any benefit out of that at all? Because it doesn't look like it's like physically hard. So in my mind, like there's no benefit to it because it's not hard enough. When the reality is that it's very calming to your whole
Mm-hmm.
system, and that's why it's good for you. Um, Time out in nature, physical touch, slow rhythmic movements, being barefoot on the earth, like standing in grass or standing on a beach, if you're so lucky to have one nearby. Um, it will calm your whole system in a way that brings you out of that fight or flight. And then from that state, you'll sleep better. I mean, it's literally called rest and digest.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're sleeping well, your digestion is going well, that's a sign that like you're more so living like in a parasympathetic state, and like that's super. Um, being and we talked about this in the beginning, and so maybe we'll just sort of end on this point where we're going to circle it back and say, what can we do to help ourselves and help our like where can we make an impact in this time? Because there are times where I feel like the reason that I want to put my head in the sand is since there's nothing I can do about that. Like I
Yeah.
already cast my vote.
Yeah.
We didn't win. So like what am I going to do? If I follow the news, I'm just going to make myself mad, right? But what I can do that makes me feel really good is go out and contribute positively within my local community. So like I'm around people, I'm helping people. When I'm helping people, I'm also helping myself. And as a just a concrete example of that is like the master swim team that I coach. I mean, like commonly I'm exhausted by the time like 6 o'clock rolls around. I have to leave at 6:30 p.m. to go to this practice from 7. I don't get home until like 8:30 or 9. It would be way easier to just go to bed. And every single time I go coach that workout and I'm not in the mood to go, as soon as I get there and I'm around all those people and like the energy is good and we play music and they start exercising and I start dancing, I'm literally, I mean, this is kind of funny. I'm standing on deck, I'm dancing to this like 80s music that, my other coach like puts on like a loudspeaker for everybody to be listening to. And I'm like, every single time, I'm like, I'm in the best mood now.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I'm like, that is so good for me to go do, like be around positive people who are
Yeah.
exercising. And so like that would be the last piece of advice is like more than ever now, put yourself out in your community, find your people. Not everyone is going to be your people right
Yeah.
now, but some people really are. And by the way, those people need you just as much as you need them.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. I have no uh where I live is a little challenging, but I agree. I mean, um, and trying to find the bits and pieces where you can, especially if you live remote. Um, yeah, I have nothing else to add. So I mean, I think we're all, we will need each other, and I think that's a really key point. And I don't think now is the time necessarily to continue to try. I mean, sure, try to convince people and educate and whatever, but like, I also think there's sort of just a re-engagement with your people, our people, versus trying to, I mean, to be honest, like if someone has an ideology that's more similar to the KKK and the Nazi Party, current or past, they're not my people, I mean, for those people to come over to anything close to what I view my values are, like something would have to be very, very traumatic in their lives because trauma often changes perspective. And I don't know if that will happen for them. And I choose
Yeah.
not to engage with them. So,
Genuinely, when we talk about the awareness piece, and like, so one of the things that I've done is like really pay attention. When I put my attention and energy into a certain thing, how do I feel after? So, like I just told you that at Master Swim practice, I leave there feeling great. Like I'm
Yeah.
in a great mood. I'm happy. I'm
Hmm.
relaxed. I come home. I fall asleep immediately. Like it's great. Right. Like,
Yeah.
and so you're like, so when I'm aware of that, it's like, oh, okay. So I need to do more things like that
Hmm.
because that is healthy for me to do. And
Right.
then one of the worst things, like probably the worst thing for me, has been to try to change a Trump supporter's mind.
Mm.
It's been incredibly frustrating and it's like it's never going to happen, and I have these like high hopes that like, oh, like, but surely this thing will change their mind, right?
Yeah.
And I have this like idealistic view, I don't, whatever, and then like, and I'll try to present my point and then like they absolutely don't agree or they see it
Yeah.
differently or, oh, but that was a long time ago, so you know it doesn't matter anymore that he sexually assaulted those women, you know, like, and it's like I can't, and then, and that's the stuff that
Hmm.
like I dwell on. And from there, yeah, I notice like my breathing starts getting
Hmm.
high and tight. My palms start sweating. Like I
Yeah.
start to fly off the handle, right? I start to get mad and you're like, okay, I'm going back into this state of where I don't feel safe.
Hmm.
And these are not my people.
Yeah.
And so you're
And
like, all right, then like, that's not a good place for me to be. It's not healthy for me. Right. But what is healthy for me then is to ground myself,
yeah.
laugh, dance.
And I mean, you bring up a really, like a lot of us, well, myself, right? I can, for the most part, insulate myself quite a bit. Um, I know people that can't, right? That their significant other is a strong Trump supporter, and they are obviously, they, for the most part, I'm not going to name any names, right? But for the most part, they've just kind of not been super political. But when it became when certain things were on the line, right? Like women's rights and LGBTQ rights and lots, electing a felon, right? They real a rapist and a felon and well, and just to be clear, like my grandfather, rest his soul, right? He died in right before COVID, 2019, and he was a lifelong Republican until Trump ran in 20. He didn't vote for Trump in 2016. He said, number one, he's a con man. He doesn't pay his people, which is true. Like he does not pay, and he's a fraud. And my grandfather, at this time he was in his mid 90s, could see that. But I also feel there's this. Yeah, it's different now, right? Like it's almost. I don't know. I won't. We won't. I won't delve down it. Where I was going with that is that some people have like it is very close. I know in your case, like some of your family, it's very close for you. However, it's not your immediate community. And so I just want to say that if you're in one of those situations, like it's very hard, I could imagine. And I think you have to take even more, using the term radical self-care, if you are in one of those situations and you have to combat it on a daily basis, essentially through whatever relationship it is. But yeah, I guess I just want to say like you can still use a lot of what we're talking about here, and protect yourself, and I also just want to say like it's a very hard situation. I can't imagine, to be honest. Like it's got to be very, very difficult. I have my own challenges, and I know you've got challenges, but I know people that have even more challenging situations, and yeah, it's their levels of stress are very high, very, very
Yeah.
high, and
And so think about that too. And like I keep feeling like we're gonna end this, but like, but
I
wait,
know.
one more
Sorry,
thing.
people can
But
stop listening if they want.
it's enjoy talking to you.
Yeah.
So like, um, that there has been, and there's a little bit of guilt in my
Mm,
heart for like feeling this way. Where my husband and I have talked about this, where like when we're even if we go back to the nervous system state,
hmm.
right, where you say, okay, my nervous system will relax and be in rest and digest mode when it inherently feels safe, when my environment is what it is, and it is safe for me. And so reminding myself that right here, right now,
Hmm.
like on this Wednesday where I'm sitting
Yeah.
here in my beautiful home in Kaneohe, I am perfectly safe,
Yep.
right? Like nobody's coming to my door. Nobody's
Yeah.
coming to get me. Like I personally won't likely like I want to say I won't feel any negative effects from whatever policies, maybe the climate change one, like
Hmm.
if we drill, baby drill, and like the climate continues to go off the rails, like, that's likely to affect me personally, will affect my daughter. There's a lot of things that will
Yeah.
affect my daughter. She's younger, but if I really look at it, like a lot of this doesn't affect me.
Hmm.
And so if I remind myself right here and now, I'm safe, right?
Hmm.
Then it makes it easy to bury my head in the sand. My conflict with that is that like I have a heart and a soul,
Yeah.
and I realize that other people really are negatively
Yeah.
affected by this. And so then you go, okay, so what can I do in this situation right now for them? Because I can't go back and like change history, right? Like we
Hmm.
are where we are, and denying that we are where we are isn't helpful at all. And so yeah,
Yeah.
it's supporting those people in your community wherever you can, and like just not being part of the problem there, and trying to
Hmm.
be part of the solution locally in your own community, in your own neighborhood, like
Yeah.
wherever, at your grocery store. um, that part I feel like is that's what we can do.
Yeah. There's what you mentioned about, right now you are, I am safe. I have a roof over my head. I have food in my refrigerator. Um, for my own situation, there are some policies around federal funding because my science job is soft money research. And so I only can pay my bills if I can apply.
It is science.
No, not so much. And I don't do climate science. I do, and ironically, those of you who know me, I do Mars science. And so, in theory, right, Trump loves Elon. Elon wants to go to Mars. It's great for the. But Elon Musk has no scientist in his staff, like literally not one. And so, this idea that he were going to go colonize Mars is ridiculous. The I could go off. We should have another podcast just on this. But the short of this is that there is I don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen with NASA funding, but I do know how much of his contracts come from. How many NASA contracts go to Elon Musk, and it's a lot. I mean, he is he's maybe the biggest contractor for NASA. I mean, conflict of interest much? I don't, sitting next to the president and talking with foreign dignitaries, and yet you're, building rockets for NASA. And I don't know. I digress. Where I was going with that is right now we are safe, right? And there are lots of things that I am worried about. You're worried about. We're all worried about. A lot of us are very anxious about what's going to happen. But that concept of coming back to right now we're okay. And so, Eckhart Tolle, right? I really love his work, The Power of Now. He's got some great talks, on his, he's got a YouTube channel or maybe it's an app that I downloaded at one point. He did some free talks, right? Of presence and the power of just staying right now in the present moment. It really does reduce immediate anxiety because a lot of what we're worried about has not yet happened, right? We're fantasizing about some situation. Now, that doesn't mean we should ignore it because there's data, there's pieces in place, and there's movements happening that make it likely that certain things will happen in the future, right? Whether that be, will we have another election in 4 years? We don't know, and people are talking about those possibilities. But right now, all we have is this moment, and we can educate ourselves and lean into, like you said, our local communities and people that will be more impacted than ourselves, and stay really cognizant of what are we, are we fantasizing about the worst case scenario? And yes, that might happen, and maybe we should do a little planning for that. I've got a niece. I'll be real honest, like, yeah, maybe I should stock up on birth control pills. She's only 5, but those things probably last forever, right? Um,
On those, Vicky,
dang
just
it.
too young
Well,
for that.
maybe,
Sorry. In there, you don't need those for her.
yeah, but things, but I have other friends that have, well, I know your daughter's in high school, we don't know. And we both live in a state right now, at least that we have protected women's rights and there's a lot of good things about living in, the states where we do. So, all I was going with that is like bring it back to right now. Right now you're safe. Right now, you've got hopefully, food and you've got a roof over your head and you're okay. And if you're not, you can always reach out to Michelle and I. We will do our best to try to help. I know, I guess I'm presuming, right, that most people, whatever, 5 people that are going to listen to this are triathletes. And I don't think triathletes are, generally speaking, being at risk of, thrown out in the street just yet. So not yet
Yeah.
anyways.
Can I just tell you this funny point to end on? Remember how, like, I don't know, I don't know if it was on Fox News or what, I don't watch Fox News, but, everybody's outraged about, like, the price of eggs.
Oh, yeah.
Like, our economy's bad because the price of eggs is so high, blah, blah. And, like, my experience of this, on Monday, I went to Costco and there were no eggs,
Mm,
right?
there
There
none.
usually there's like pallets of eggs, right? Like there's
Right.
thousands of eggs like in this like freezer section or whatever. There's no eggs at all. And I just like laughed, which is how I knew I was regulated well, right? Because like I didn't get mad. It's like I just laughed that off. And also like it didn't occur to me to blame that on the president.
Yeah.
Either one,
Because
right?
it's like,
Either one, like I just don't blame that on the
it's a,
president. Like there happens to not be eggs right now. I don't know. There's something happening up a supply chain somewhere. It's no,
yeah,
like I don't know whose fault it is, but even as much as I can't stand and despise that guy, and I could go off and be like, well, there's not even any eggs in my grocery store. It's Trump's fault, right? No, it's not. Like I can blame him for a lot of other things, but I'm not going to blame him for the fact that there's no eggs. Like so it's like there's certain things where we're gonna like place blame where it's due, and then not get outraged about dumb stuff that isn't even
right,
related.
right. Yeah.
So anyway, when you just it just reminded me of that when you said I have food in my house, and I was thinking I don't have any eggs.
Yeah. Well, and it's crazy because I mean, when I lived in Hawaii, there were like chickens everywhere. So, how do you not have? Can you have chickens where you're at? Can you have some hens that would?
So like this is another story.
Yeah,
So had chickens in so when Lana was little, she was probably 6 or 7, and I just decided that like this is cool. Like we live in a place where we can have chickens. I went down to like the local feed store or whatever. I bought 5 or 6 chicks and like little baby hens, and it takes I don't know 6 months or a year or something, and then they start laying
hmm,
eggs. And so we raised these little baby chicks. We built a hen house in the backyard. I mean, it was awesome. And I just thought this is really fun because then my daughter can go out and like collect eggs every day and bring them in. And by the way, they were like the best eggs. Like
yeah.
the yolks were like orange, like they were really good. And my neighbors got really mad. So like my
Oh,
neighbors next door, they don't like animals, they don't like people, they don't like
hmm.
kids, they don't like us, whatever. Um, and so she just like went off the handle because at one point, like one of my hens was going over into her yard and she didn't like that. And she was like, keep your chickens in your own yard. And I was like, yeah, I mean, like I would like to, but they have wings, So
They kind of, yeah, they fly.
basically, I promised her that because I was like, I'm not getting rid of my chickens, but also once these chickens die, I won't
Yeah,
get more chickens. Like we won't, and because technically it's like an HOA here,
gotcha.
and it's a mellow HOA. My husband's on the board. Maybe I could put him on the board. I'll put him on the inside so that he can like make the rules so that they benefit just us, and
Yeah,
then like that would be appropriate, right? We live
yeah,
in this lawless society, so screw it. We do whatever we want.
right, right.
You
I,
know, screw my neighbor. I don't care what she thinks.
yep, yep.
Anyway,
Well,
the total
yeah,
selfish stuff.
on that note, we can bring it back to local farming. Join a CSA. Keep it local. So, all right. Well, thank you all for listening. If you've got any ideas for things that you'd like us to chat about, please let us know. If you want to share, your ideas for how to, how you are coping, we'd love to hear about that too. Because, maybe you've got some really great ideas that we didn't cover here. And, I think now is the time to share and help us out, help your community out.
And just
So,
FYI, this is not going to be a politics podcast
right.
going forward.
No.
We want to be authentic, is what it is.
Yeah.
And a couple of days ago, Mickey and I are both like, "How do we do a podcast today?" Because
Yeah.
like our minds are are very occupied right now with just what's going on in the country because we're not immune to all of this. And so,
Yeah.
like in the era of being authentic, this was our topic today. But next week we'll talk about, I don't know, running or something else.
Strength, maybe, or yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Okay. Well, it was great to talk, Michelle.
Thanks.
Bye.